May the words of my mouth and the meditation of our hearts be acceptable in your sight, O Lord, our rock and our risen Redeemer. Amen. There is something deeply human, perhaps even holy, about our instinct to follow a shepherd. From our earliest days, we learn to trust voices outside ourselves. A teacher stands at the front of the room, and we follow. A coach draws up a play, and we run it. A doctor gives a diagnosis, and we accept it. A mentor offers direction, and we take it. Even the head of a household, a pastor in a church, or a president in a nation, these figures bear a certain gravity, a certain weight. And rightly so. As the Apostle Paul tells us in Romans 13, authority is not an accident of history, it is a gift of God. A means by which God orders, protects, and guides human life. This instinct to follow is not a flaw. It is, in fact, a reflection of how we are made. Shepherd or sheep are meant to have a shepherd. People are meant to be led. And yet, if we are honest, we have also learned something else. We have been burned. The teacher who misled. The coach who used rather than nurtured. The leader who promised and failed. The pastor who wounded instead of healed. The head of a household who ruled harshly instead of loving gently. We have followed, and sometimes following has led us not into green pastures, but into harm. And so the question presses in on us this morning. What kind of shepherd can we trust? The prophet Ezekiel speaks into a moment when that question was not just theoretical, but was painfully real. In Ezekiel 34, the Lord looks out over His people and sees a flock scattered, wounded, and neglected. But the problem is not the sheep, it is the shepherds. Woe to the shepherds of Israel, God says, who only take care of themselves. These leaders, kings, princes, priests, had been entrusted with the care of God's people. They were meant to strengthen the weak, heal the sick, bind up the injured, bring back the strayed, and seek the lost. Instead, they fed themselves. They ruled with force and harshness. They let the sheep wander into danger. Now, historically, this was the story of Israel's final days before exile. Corrupt kings, self-serving officials, negligent spiritual leaders, all of them together had failed in their calling. And the result? The sheep were scattered among the nations, prey to every wild beast. But listen closely to what God says next, because it changes everything. I myself will search for my sheep. I myself will be the shepherd of my sheep. When every earthly shepherd fails, God does not abandon the flock. He steps in. Now, fast forward several centuries. In John 10, Jesus stands before the people of Israel and begins to speak about shepherds again. And make no mistake, the situation has not improved much. The religious leaders of Jesus' day, the Pharisees, the scribes, the chief priests, were meant to shepherd God's people. Yet again, many had turned the vocation into a means of power and control. They burdened the people with heavy laws. They guarded their own authority. They cast out those who did not conform. And into that world, into that long history of failed shepherds, Jesus says something astonishing. I am the good shepherd. But the word he uses here for good is richer than we often hear. It is the Greek word kalos, not merely good as in competent or merely morally upright. That would be the word agathos. Instead, this word means beautiful, noble, or worthy. I am the noble shepherd. And what makes him noble? The noble shepherd lays down his life for the sheep. Now, here is where the sermon turns, where it moves from observation to proclamation. Because the truth is, the worst shepherd you have ever followed may not be any teacher, coach, leader, or pastor. It is your own flesh. And behind it, whispering, distorting, urging, there is another voice. The voice of the one Jesus describes just a few verses earlier. The thief who comes only to steal, kill, and destroy. Sin promises freedom, but delivers bondage. The devil promises wisdom, but delivers confusion. Death promises finality, but delivers fear. These are cruel shepherds. They do not feed, they consume. They do not guide, they scatter. They do not protect, they devour. And left to ourselves, we follow them all too easily. But then comes Jesus, the noble shepherd. He does not stand at a distance and shout instructions. He enters the field. He walks into the danger. He places himself between the sheep and everything that would destroy them. He lays down his life. Not as a tragic accident, not as a victim of circumstance, but as a deliberate act of love. On the cross, Jesus confronts every bad shepherd at once. Sin, he bears it in his own body. Death, he submits to it and breaks it from the inside. The devil, he allows the worst to be done. And in doing so, strips him of his power. This is what makes him noble. Not simply that he cares, but that he gives. Not simply that he leads, but that he dies. And then on the third day, he rises. Because the shepherd who lays down his life is also the shepherd who takes it up again. Now he stands not as a fallen protector, but as the living guardian of his flock. And what kind of shepherd is he now? He knows his sheep. Not in the abstract, but personally. He knows your voice, your fears, your history. the ways you have been led astray, the wounds you carry from those who should have cared for you. He calls you, and His voice is different. It does not coerce, it does not manipulate, it does not crush. It calls, and in that calling, it creates trust. He leads you, not into confusion, but into truth. Not into harm, but into life. Even when the path runs through the valley of the shadow, His rod and staff are not instruments of fear, but of comfort. And He feeds you. Yes, here is where it becomes beautifully concrete. He leads you here, to this altar. And what does He give you? Not symbols of distant care, but the very artifacts of His noblest act. His body given for you. His blood shed for you. Here the shepherd feeds the sheep with Himself. Forgiveness for your sin, life for your death, salvation for your wandering soul. Now, it would be easier if the other voices simply just disappeared. But we all know that they do not. Other shepherds still call. Some are legitimate authorities placed by God for your good. Others are impostors, eager to lead you astray. And even the good ones will fail you at times, because they too are sheep in need of a shepherd. So the question remains, whose voice will you trust? And the answer finally is this: only one shepherd has laid down his life for you. Only one shepherd has taken it up again. Only one shepherd speaks with a voice that leads not to loss, but to life. He is the noble shepherd, and He will never lead you wrong. So whatever you have suffered, whatever misuse of authority, whatever betrayal, whatever neglect, you are not left to wander. You are gathered. You are carried. You are led in the arms of the Good Shepherd. And here is the good news that echoes beyond every failure, beyond every wound, beyond even death itself. He has made it so you never have to leave. Amen.